The door was locked from the inside. Smoke hung low. Too many eyes, not enough exits. And one wrong move was about to cost somebody everything. That's how Harlem felt that winter. Not loud, not flashy, tight. Like a room where everyone knows a gun is on the table but nobody's admitting it yet. I could feel it before the whispers reached me. Power was shifting, not in the streets, not in the numbers, in the space people thought was untouchable. Home. See, Harlem doesn't fall apart from outside pressure. Cops been trying that forever. Rivals too. Harlem cracks when something gets inside and starts talking sweet. Back then, folks liked to pretend this place was chaos. Music, dice, women, trouble, but that was surface noise. Underneath, it ran on rules. Respect was currency. Silence was protection and dignity. That was the one thing nobody could afford to lose. I built my seat by understanding that. Not by shouting, not by flexing. I watched who talked too much, who stared too long, who thought confidence meant invincibility. That's why they never saw it coming. She didn't walk in with muscle, didn't bring threats, didn't even look dangerous. Silk dress, calm smile, eyes that measured instead of blinked. The kind of person who asks questions that sound harmless until you realize they're taking notes in their head. Most men mistake curiosity for innocence. That's how traps get set. She wasn't from here, didn't belong to the cold, didn't understand what it costs to survive a place where hunger teaches faster than school books, but she wanted in, not to live it. To touch it, to own the story of it, and worse, she wanted to be seen. That's where the first line got crossed. I don't mind outsiders who know their place. Money talks, influence buys quiet, but when someone starts acting like the streets are a stage and the people are props, that's when I start paying attention, because attention is expensive. At first it was just talk, laughter where it didn't belong, chairs pulled too close, familiarity dressed up as confidence. Folks noticed. They always do. Harlem sees everything. And so did the woman standing beside me at home. She didn't ask questions, didn't raise her voice, didn't demand explanations. That silence, that was the warning. People think calm means weakness. That's how they walk straight into ruin. What nobody understood yet was this. I wasn't the most dangerous mind in that room. And the moment disrespect stepped out of line, something irreversible was already in motion. Because in Harlem, you don't get checked when you're loud. You get checked when you're comfortable, and she was getting very comfortable. Comfort makes people sloppy. That's rule number one. Once she felt safe, she started moving like the room belonged to her, sitting where she wanted, speaking when she shouldn't, laughing a second too long, a second too loud. Harlem noticed. Harlem always notices when someone forgets where they are. I let it ride at first. Power doesn't panic. Power observes. She thought she was learning me, studying habits, collecting angles. What she didn't realize was that every move she made told me exactly who she was. Not brave, not loyal, hungry for relevance. That kind of hunger doesn't stop at the plate. She wanted visibility, wanted her presence to mean something. So she stopped hiding, stopped whispering, started showing up where respect mattered, places where eyes remembered faces, places where absence could start wars. That's when the air changed. I'd walk into a room and feel it before anyone spoke. Conversations bending. People watching my reaction instead of the door. Not because of fear, because they wanted to know who I'd choose. That's a dangerous position for a man to be in. She didn't understand that every public smile cuts someone else privately, especially when the smile belongs to an outsider. Especially when the woman at home built the foundation you're standing on. The street started murmuring, not gossip, judgment, the kind that doesn't fade. The kind that waits, and still she pushed. She thought proximity meant power, thought sitting close enough made her untouchable, that being seen with me rewrote the rules. But Harlem doesn't rewrite rules, it enforces them. One night somebody tested me. A drunk, a grudge, bad timing. He said the wrong thing too close to the table. The room froze. Everyone waited to see which version of me would answer. The knife came out fast, not angry, efficient, a lesson delivered clean. Blood hit the floor, music died mid-note. Most people can't handle that moment. They break, they scream, they run. She did. She watched like it was a scene written for her. Eyes wide, breathing steady, studying violence like it was culture. That's when I knew she didn't belong, not because she was afraid, but because she was. She mistook survival for spectacle, thought danger was a costume you could try on and take off. What she didn't see was the woman at home hearing about it all without hearing a word, filing it away, waiting. Silence isn't absence, it's preparation. And when silence finally decides to speak, it doesn't ask permission. The real problem wasn't the affair anymore. It was the disrespect growing teeth. And the night it finally stepped into the open, nobody in that room would be able to pretend it was just talk anymore. Public rooms are where mistakes go to die or get remembered forever. That charity night wasn't about money. It never is. It was about alignment. Who stands where, who gets acknowledged, who gets ignored. Power doesn't announce itself, it waits to see who walks toward it. I felt her before I saw her. The room shifted, not noise. Weight. The kind of presence that makes men straighten their backs without realizing why. She didn't rush, didn't scan the room. She moved like the destination already knew her name. That's the difference between someone visiting power and someone built inside it. For a moment the distraction lost its shine. I saw contrast, flash versus gravity, curiosity versus command. And somewhere in that gap my mistake stared back at me. The outsider noticed too. Insecurity crept into her smile. You could see it tighten. She'd spent months believing attention meant dominance. But attention disappears the second something real enters the room. She needed to reclaim the moment. That was her error. She walked up like she owned the outcome, ignored the woman beside me first, deliberate, calculated, a small insult meant to establish hierarchy. Then came the voice, polite, sweet, sharp underneath, compliments dressed as questions, jokes pretending to be harmless, every word chosen to cut without drawing blood. The room went still, not anticipation, alarm. That kind of disrespect doesn't echo, it detonates. My instincts kicked in before my thoughts. Old habits, old reflexes, but movement wasn't the answer this time. Violence would have crowned her a victim. Silence would have turned me into a spectator. I was boxed in. That's when she stepped forward. No hesitation, no emotion on her face, just precision. She closed the distance slowly, invading space without touching. The rules of polite society bent around her and snapped. She smiled, not warmth, assessment. And she leaned in close enough that the room stopped breathing. Her voice didn't travel, it didn't need to. 3 sentences, clean, surgical, each one removing a layer of fantasy the outsider had been living inside. A reminder of where she stood, what she was borrowing, and how fast borrowed things get taken back. I watched confidence drain in real time. Hands shook, eyes darted, reality landed hard. That's when fear finally arrived. She realized too late this wasn't rivalry, this was correction. When we turned and walked away, the room parted without being asked. No words followed us, none were needed. Behind us something had been marked, and marked things in Harlem don't stay untouched for long. She thought the night was over. She had no idea it was just beginning. People think punishment always makes noise, that's how they miss it. By morning the city was still breathing, music still playing, taxis still running, but her access, gone, quietly, efficiently. Like a light switched off in rooms she didn't even know she needed. She tried the first door with confidence. Familiar smile, familiar name, it didn't open. Second door, same thing, no explanation, no argument, just a wall where warmth used to be. That's when panic starts whispering. She told herself it was coincidence. Bad timing. One misunderstanding stacked on another. That's what people say when they don't want to admit the ground moved under their feet. By the third club she knew. No eye contact, no greetings, no service. Men who used to laugh with her suddenly found reasons to look past her. Bartenders polished glasses that were already clean. Doormen became statues. That kind of silence isn't personal, it's coordinated. Word had traveled faster than she ever could. Not shouted, passed hand to hand. A look, a nod. Instructions that didn't need repeating. She was no longer welcome anywhere that mattered. That's when she made the second mistake. She thought the freeze meant confusion, thought she could clear it up by facing me directly. People always think proximity gives them leverage. She didn't understand leverage had already been removed. The back room was thick with smoke and patience, cards on the table, men watching hands, not faces. She walked in like she still had permission to breathe the same air. The room didn't greet her, I didn't look up. That silence hurt her more than a slap ever could. She spoke my name like it still meant something, like history couldn't be erased. I finished my move. Let the smoke settle. Then I made the only statement she was going to get by not giving her one. No anger, no warning, no farewell, just absence. That's when it hit her, not emotionally, physically. She wasn't in danger yet, but she was expendable, and expendable things don't get explanations. She left fast, too fast. Fear finally doing its job. But fear alone doesn't save people, because when you've been marked, the city doesn't forget just because you run. And somewhere else, someone was already deciding whether silence was enough, or if an example still needed to be made. She thought escape meant distance, that if she crossed the line back downtown, the weight would lift. Different streets, different faces, safer buildings with doormen who knew her name. But power doesn't stop at neighborhood borders. It just changes shape. Back in her apartment, the silence followed her in. The phone didn't ring. The typewriter stared back blank like it had lost faith in her. Words that once came easy now felt dangerous. She had always believed ink was a weapon. That exposure could bend men. That stories could protect her. That belief cracked when she realized fear had reached her desk before she did. Every sentence she tried to write circled the same question. What happens after this gets printed? Because she knew the answer wasn't lawyers or angry letters or corrections in small print. It was nothing. And nothing is worse than threats you can't see. Still, pride is stubborn. She convinced herself there was still one angle left. One place where the old magic worked. One conversation that could reverse the tide. So she dressed like confidence, painted her face like armor, and headed back uptown, telling herself she wasn't running toward danger, she was reclaiming control. The city felt different on the ride up. Darker, closer. Streets she once romanticized now looked like corridors with no exits. The club door swallowed sound when she stepped inside. Everyone knew why she was there. She walked toward the back, heart loud, breath uneven. When she saw me seated calm, hands steady, she almost smiled until she saw my eyes. There was nothing left for her there. No heat, no curiosity, no memory, just evaluation. I didn't dismiss her, didn't threaten her, didn't move. I erased her. That was the moment the illusion died. She saw the men around the table for what they were, not characters, not color, not inspiration, but execution waiting for instruction. She understood then, her safety had never been hers. She left shaking, and that should have been the end. But endings in Harlem don't always come when you expect them. Because while she was learning how small she was, something much larger had been watching me from the edges, waiting for distraction, waiting for weakness. And the moment this chapter closed, another enemy decided it was time to open fire. While she was running from ghosts, something real was moving. Men who don't care about elegance don't wait for invitations. They wait for openings, and distraction makes openings. I felt it before the reports came in. Numbers missing, runners late. Corners that used to hum suddenly going quiet. That's not coincidence, that's pressure. Someone was testing the perimeter. They started small. A shove here, a broken window there, just enough noise to see who flinched. Then came the fires. Quick, angry flames meant to send a message more than do damage. The message was clear: you're slipping. That kind of talk only comes from one place: north. A man who believed force was philosophy, a man who didn't whisper and didn't wait. He saw the distraction, smelled vulnerability, thought the crown had gotten heavy. He was wrong about one thing: this house didn't weaken, it tightened. She stood behind me when the news came in. No questions, no panic, just a hand on my shoulder, steady as a loaded chamber. That's when I remembered who never left. Outsiders chase the story. Insiders protect the structure. The affair had been noise. Embarrassing, yes, dangerous maybe, but it didn't crack the foundation. It showed me where the walls needed reinforcing. I pulled inward. Fewer meetings, shorter conversations, orders passed clean and quiet. The kind of discipline that scares men who rely on chaos. Across the river, the other side mistook silence for surrender. They started moving harder. Runners beat, spots torched. Violence meant to force my hand, but every hit told me where they were coming from. That's the thing about loud men, they announce themselves. I stood at the window one night looking down at the streets that raised me, the same streets that had just taught someone else a lesson without spilling blood. She was still there, calm, unmoved. I said the name out loud for the first time, the one everyone else avoided, the one tied to beer money and brute force. She didn't blink. That's when I knew the next phase wouldn't be handled with whispers. The silk dress was gone. What was coming next wore cheap suits, heavy hands, and expected me to fold. They were about to learn the difference between distraction and defeat. Violence has a rhythm. Once you hear it, you know what's next. The hits got sloppier, angrier. That told me everything. When a man stops measuring, he's already losing. He thinks force will speed things up. He thinks fear moves faster than planning. It doesn't. I didn't answer right away. That was intentional. Let him spend money. Let him burn patience. Every move he made stretched his lines thinner. Every torch lit up one of his own shadows. My people wanted permission. They always do when blood starts spilling. I told them to wait. Waiting is how you make loud men nervous. Behind closed doors, the map changed. Routes shifted. Drop points vanished. New faces showed up where old ones used to stand. To the streets, it looked like retreat. To the right eyes, it looked like bait. She watched it all without comment. That's how I knew this wasn't fear driving her. Fear talks. This was confidence. The quiet kind that knows storms pass if you don't chase them. Then the word came in. One of his boys stepped too far. Wrong corner, wrong time. Thought reputation traveled faster than consequence. It didn't. I still didn't move. That's what unsettled them most. Men expect retaliation. They plan for it. They don't know what to do when nothing happens. Silence turned into doubt. Doubt turned into mistakes. Meetings started happening without permission. Arguments broke out. Loyalty wavered. You can't run pressure forever without cracks forming. That's when I sent the first message. Not with a bullet, with absence. One of his trusted spots went dark overnight. No fire, no bodies, just gone like it never existed. The money stopped flowing. Phones rang with no answers. That's when he understood. This wasn't a street fight. This was a squeeze. I felt her hand on my shoulder again. Same place, same pressure. A reminder. We had survived distraction. We had survived disrespect. Now someone thought they could take what was built. They were about to learn that Harlem doesn't collapse under attack. It closes in. And the next move wouldn't be quiet at all. Pressure does funny things to men who live by force. Once the money slowed, his patience evaporated. He wanted something loud. Something final. A display meant to scare everyone back into line. That's when he crossed the line from strategy into desperation. The hit came in daylight, sloppy, public, meant to make noise, runners scattered. A message written in broken glass and blood. That wasn't power. That was a man asking to be answered. I didn't rush. I let the streets talk back for me. Corners stopped paying him attention. Information dried up. Even fear needs cooperation, and cooperation had just been revoked. That's when alliances shifted. Men who had been watching from the sidelines, quiet, calculating, started weighing outcomes instead of loyalties. No speeches, no meetings, just doors opening on one side and closing on the other. I stayed still. Stillness makes impatient men reckless. He started demanding results, started blaming his own people. That's the fastest way to make enemies out of subordinates. One night I finally stood up, not with an announcement, with a walk. I moved through Harlem slow, deliberate, no entourage, no noise, just presence. People felt it before they saw it. That's how you know a place is still yours. She walked beside me part of the way, didn't need to say anything. Her steadiness said it all. The word traveled faster than I did. By the time I reached the corner, the decision had already been made somewhere else. The man who thought force could replace patience had lost something he couldn't buy back: time. And when time runs out, choices get made without you. The streets went quiet again. Too quiet. Because quiet like that doesn't mean peace. Means the last move is about to be played. Quiet after violence isn't relief. It's the pause before the bill comes due. I didn't chase him, never had to. When a man burns enough bridges, he ends up standing alone without realizing it. That's when the city decides what to do with him. Messages started arriving without names attached. Meetings canceled. Protection withdrawn. He was still breathing, still moving, but now he was exposed. Exposure makes men dangerous. He tried to force one last play. pushed into territory that wasn't his, sent people who didn't understand Harlem, didn't know the corners, didn't feel the rhythm. They didn't come back, not because I ordered it, because nobody stopped it. That's the difference between ruling and reacting. When a place belongs to you, the streets handle disrespect on their own. I stood at the window again, same view, same shadows stretching long as the sun dropped. She was there as always, unshaken. I realized something then. The real war hadn't been the one with him or the distraction before it. The real test was whether the foundation could hold under pressure from every direction. It did. The noise faded, money stabilized, fear found new addresses. The threat dissolved without a headline or a body to point at. That's how real endings happen. She never asked what I did. I never explained. Power doesn't need witnesses, only results. The streets went back to breathing, but stories like this don't end clean, because somewhere beyond Harlem, someone was always watching, learning, waiting for a different kind of opening. And as long as there are men who mistake patience for weakness, this game never truly ends. That's when I knew. The next move wouldn't come from the shadows. It would come from someone smiling in the light. Smiles are the hardest things to read. They come wrapped in compliments, handshakes, promises that sound reasonable. No raised voices, no threats, just men who act like business is all they want. That's how the next danger showed up. Not burning corners, not beating runners, paperwork, meetings. New faces claiming to bring order. Men who said they respected what I'd built right before explaining how it should belong to them. Different language, same hunger. They wanted the numbers without the neighborhood, the money without the blood. Thought I'd be tired by now, thought distraction had softened me. They didn't see what stood behind me. She watched those meetings from the edge, silent, listening, catching the details men forget when they think they're the smartest in the room. One of them smiled too much, asked too many questions about structure, about succession, about what happens when things change. That's not curiosity, that's planning. I let him talk, let him feel heard, let him believe the door was open. It was. By the time he left, the shape of the next threat was clear, cleaner than the last, more dangerous, because men like that don't rush, they replace. I turned to her after they were gone. She met my eyes without hesitation. No doubt, no fear, just certainty. Whatever came next, it wouldn't be handled with knives or fire. It would be handled with patience, influence, and timing. And the worst part, the men with the smiles thought they were early. They had no idea they were already late. Late is the most dangerous thing a man can be when he doesn't know it. They kept smiling, kept sending feelers, invitations dressed up as respect. They thought patience was on their side. That time would wear me down the way it wears down most kings. What they didn't see was how tightly the circle had closed. Money started choosing sides, quietly. Roots shifted again, but this time toward me. Not because I demanded it, because stability attracts loyalty faster than fear ever could. Those smiling men began hearing no without anyone saying it. Deals stalled. Calls went unanswered. Doors they assumed were open suddenly needed keys they didn't have. Confusion crept in. Confusion turns polished men into desperate ones. One of them tried to bypass the structure. Thought he could talk to my people directly, offer protection, offer futures. That's when the streets corrected him, not violently, decisively. He was received politely, listened to carefully, and then escorted out with nothing accomplished. No insult, no threat, just failure. Failure sticks. That night she poured a drink and set it beside me without asking. We didn't toast. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The message had already landed where it needed to. The smiling men were losing control of the narrative. And when men lose the story they're telling themselves, they start making mistakes they can't explain away. Somewhere nearby, one of them was about to try something reckless. Something that would force a response. And when that happened, patience would finally be finished talking. Reckless always announces itself with urgency. The call came late, too late for coincidence, too fast to be careful. One of the smiling men had decided to skip the chessboard and flip the table. He went after the wrong piece. A move like that doesn't start a war. It ends negotiations. I didn't raise my voice, didn't pace, didn't ask questions that already had answers. I stood still and let the moment finish forming. Then I moved, not publicly, not violently, strategically. By sunrise, his partners were distancing themselves. By noon, his funding evaporated. By nightfall, he was alone in a room full of people who suddenly didn't recognize him. That's what happens when you confuse access with ownership. She watched the fallout without expression. The same calm she carried when everything started to unravel months ago. The same calm that told me this house would stand no matter who tested it. I understood then. The distraction had sharpened us. The disrespect had clarified the rules. The threats had forced alignment. Nothing was wasted. The smiling men stopped smiling. Meetings ended. Proposals disappeared. Power settled back into its natural shape. Harlem breathed again. But breathing doesn't mean sleeping, because every victory teaches someone else a lesson. And somewhere another set of eyes was already studying this one, deciding how they'd try next. This story doesn't end with applause, it ends with readiness. Readiness is a quiet discipline. When the noise fades and everyone thinks the lesson has been learned, that's when you sharpen the blade you hope you never have to show. I didn't celebrate, I consolidated. Celebrations make men sloppy. Harlem adjusted fast, it always does. Corners settled back into rhythm. Money moved clean again. Faces relaxed, but eyes stayed alert. That's how a place survives, by remembering what almost happened. She stayed steady through it all, not proud, not relieved, just present, the way foundations are. You don't notice them when they're strong, only when they crack. I spent more time listening than talking. Listening tells you who's lying to themselves, who's waiting, who's pretending this chapter closed the book. It didn't. Because power invites curiosity the way light invites insects. Someone always believes they can touch it without getting burned. I started hearing my name in rooms I wasn't in. Not admiration, calculation, men measuring distance, timing, opportunity. That's fine, let them measure. I knew one thing for sure now: distractions get handled early. Disrespect gets corrected once. And anyone who mistakes calm for weakness gets educated, quietly. The city outside the window looked the same as it always had, same streets, same shadows, but underneath the balance had shifted back into place. She placed her hand on my shoulder again, same spot, same pressure. A reminder of what held when everything tried to pull apart. Whatever came next wouldn't catch us divided, and whoever tried it wouldn't be dealing with a man chasing power. They'd be dealing with a house that already owned it. Ownership changes how threats feel. When you're chasing power, every sound makes you turn your head. When you already have it, you listen for what isn't being said. That's where danger hides. The city looked calm, too calm, no friction, no challenges, no curiosity loud enough to expose itself. That kind of peace doesn't come naturally. It's chosen or imposed. I knew someone was learning, not testing, studying. The old enemies were finished. The reckless ones always are. What remained were thinkers, men who didn't announce themselves with fire or fists. Men who understood patience the way I did. Those are the ones you don't underestimate. I started seeing unfamiliar faces where familiar ones used to stand, not close enough to confront, just close enough to observe. New money flowing through old channels. New questions wrapped in respect. I didn't stop it. You don't close doors on curiosity. You let it walk in far enough to reveal its intentions. She noticed it too. She always does. She said nothing, just stayed closer. Presence tightening the perimeter more effectively than any guard. That's when the message arrived. No name, no threat, just information I hadn't shared with anyone outside this house. Details too precise to be coincidence, too calm to be accidental. Someone had been listening for a long time. That's when I understood. This wasn't about Harlem anymore. This was bigger, cleaner, smarter. And whoever was behind it didn't want chaos. They wanted control. I folded the message, slipped it into my pocket, and looked out over the streets one more time. The board was changing again. And this time the next move wouldn't come from inside Harlem at all. Control doesn't knock. It studies patterns, schedules, habits. It waits until it knows you better than you know yourself. That's how real operators move. The message wasn't a threat. That's what made it dangerous. No demands, no bravado, just facts, roots, times, names that weren't supposed to leave this side of the river. That meant reach. I didn't react. Reaction tells people where to press. I filed it away and kept the routine steady. Same meetings, same routes, same face to the world. Let them think they were invisible. Inside, the circle tightened, fewer voices, shorter chains, information trimmed down to what was necessary. Control starts by limiting what can leak. She adjusted without being told. Different hours, different paths, same calm. That kind of alignment doesn't get taught. It's earned. Then I sent a question back. Not directly. A quiet probe through channels that only answer when something matters. I wanted to know who thought they could reach into Harlem without permission. The answer didn't come right away. That told me everything. Whoever it was didn't rush, didn't flinch, didn't chase response. They were confident enough to wait. Confidence like that doesn't belong to street men. It belongs to institutions. That's when the threat took shape in my mind, not as a rival but as a system. Clean hands, long memory, resources that don't show up on corners. And systems don't make mistakes unless someone forces them to. I looked at her. She met my eyes, no fear, no questions. Whatever was coming next wouldn't be handled with street rules. It would be handled with patience, leverage, and consequences designed to be felt much later. Because when systems move, they don't aim to hurt you. They aim to replace you. And replacement was something I wasn't prepared to allow. Replacement only works when the original steps aside. I didn't plan to. Systems believe in inevitability, in numbers, in momentum. They think time is on their side because they can afford to wait. That's where they miscalculate people who come from places that learn patience the hard way. I began feeding them stability. Clean operations, predictable flows, no spikes, no noise, everything a system wants to see before it moves in closer. Let them get comfortable. At the same time, I started identifying the pressure points. They didn't protect people, not the ones on paper, the ones who moved between layers, the ones who thought loyalty was flexible. You don't fight a system head-on. You let it rely on the wrong assumptions. She became my anchor. Fewer appearances, more influence behind the scenes, calls answered before questions were asked. Doors opened because she remembered names systems forget. That's how you slow something too big to stop outright. Then the first crack appeared. A request came through the wrong channel, small mistake, almost invisible, but systems don't make small mistakes unless someone inside is nervous. Nervous means human. Human means leverage. I didn't act on it immediately. I let it sit. Let pressure build where they couldn't see it. When a system starts doubting itself, it begins creating its own errors. That doubt spread. Meetings delayed. Decisions deferred. Authority questioned quietly. They still thought they were in control. They weren't. Because the moment a system hesitates, it gives a man like me room to move. And I was already moving. The next message wouldn't be a probe. It would be an answer. And once it landed, there would be no going back. Answers don't come wrapped in explanations. They arrive as consequences. The reply went out clean. No signatures, no fingerprint, just a shift so precise it couldn't be mistaken for chance. A contract rerouted, a favor withdrawn. A promise quietly expired before it could be collected. Nothing loud happened. That's how I knew it landed. The system adjusted, slowly at first. Like an animal testing its weight on a cracked floor. They started checking their own reflections, verifying loyalties, asking questions they should have asked months ago. That's when you see it. Control isn't strength, it's coordination. And coordination breaks the moment trust wobbles. I watched from a distance, kept my name out of their mouths. Let them argue about causes instead of culprits. Let them fix symptoms while the disease kept spreading. She stayed close, not visible. Present where it mattered, a word here, a pause there. Timing is everything when you're bending something that thinks it's unbendable. Then came the call, not a threat, not a demand, a request. They wanted a meeting, neutral ground, clean hands, a conversation about alignment. That's how systems admit they misjudged you, by pretending it was mutual. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence do what silence does best, stretch, creep. Make men imagine worst outcomes because imagination is crueler than reality. When I finally agreed, I chose the terms, time, place, distance, everything measured, because if they thought this was a negotiation, they were already behind. I stood by the window that night, city breathing steady below. Same streets, same shadows, different balance. She placed her hand on my shoulder. Same spot, same pressure. The board was set again. And tomorrow, someone who believed in systems was going to learn what happens when they sit across from a man who believes in leverage, the kind that doesn't leave marks until it's far too late. Neutral ground is never neutral, it just tells you who thinks they're safe. I arrived early, that matters. When you control the waiting, you control the temperature of the room. I didn't bring muscle, didn't need to. Muscle changes the conversation. I wanted clarity. They came in pairs, clean suits, clean hands, eyes trained to read posture, not faces. They sat like this was routine, like the outcome hadn't already started without them knowing. They talked first. That told me everything. Alignment, stability, long-term thinking. Words men use when they want ownership without responsibility. They spoke like Harlem was a column on a ledger, something to be optimized, streamlined, absorbed. I let them finish. Then I spoke once. Not about territory, not about money, about assumptions. I told them they were late, that they destudied the structure but missed the foundation, that they'd mistaken patience for fatigue and silence for vacancy. I watched the smallest one flinch, just a breath. That's all it takes. I laid out consequences they were already feeling but hadn't connected yet. Losses they'd blamed on inefficiency. Delays they'd chalked up to weather. Doubts they thought were internal. They were. I didn't threaten. I clarified. I told them systems work best when they stay in their lanes. And when they don't, they learn the cost of friction with something that doesn't need permission to exist. That's when they tried to smile again. The smile didn't land. They offered compromise, a seat, a share, a transition that sounded respectful. They needed me to validate their process so they could move forward without admitting failure. I declined, calmly, completely. I stood up before they could respond. Ending a meeting is the loudest thing you can do in silence. As I walked out, I felt it, the shift. Not victory, recognition. They finally understood they weren't negotiating with a man. They were negotiating with a reality they couldn't replace. And when systems meet something they can't absorb, they do one of two things. They retreat, or they escalate. I stepped back into the street knowing which one was coming next, because men who believe in control never forgive resistance, and the next move wouldn't be polite at all. The room was chosen for neutrality, that's what they called it. To me, it felt like a test. Clean walls, controlled lighting, chairs spaced just far enough apart to suggest balance. Men like this believe distance creates safety. It doesn't. They arrived on time. That told me they were nervous. Confidence shows up late. Caution shows up early. No small talk. No smiles this time, just careful eyes and measured breathing. Systems don't like uncertainty, and I had become theirs. They spoke first. They always do when they need something. They talked about structure, about efficiency, about continuity. Words designed to sound inevitable. They framed replacement like evolution, like progress, like I should be grateful they were offering me a graceful exit. I let them finish. Silence after someone sells inevitability is powerful. It forces them to hear how thin their argument really is. I didn't threaten them, didn't raise my voice, didn't even lean forward. I told them one thing, that what they were trying to replace wasn't a position. It wasn't a system. It wasn't even me. It was trust, and trust doesn't transfer. I explained, calmly, that every dollar they wanted passed through hands that knew my name, not theirs. Every corner they studied answered to faces that grew up here. That systems survive on compliance, but neighborhoods survive on memory. You can buy paperwork. You can't buy belonging. That's when I saw it, the shift. The moment they understood the math didn't work the way they thought it did. No violence required. No leverage revealed, just truth settling in. They asked what I wanted. That question told me the meeting was already over. I stood, not abruptly, with finality. I told them they already had what they were going to get, distance, as long as they respected it, and that the cost of testing it again wouldn't be loud, but it would be permanent. I left first, I always do. Outside, the city felt unchanged. Same streets, same movement, same quiet understanding between people who know where they stand. She was waiting, not anxious, not curious, certain. We walked home together, no words needed. The thing outsiders never understand is this. Power doesn't end with a victory, it stabilizes. The distraction had passed. The threats had been absorbed. The system had learned its limits. Harlem remained. And anyone watching closely would have realized something important that night. This wasn't a story about a man who survived temptation, rivals, or institutions. It was about a house that didn't fall. And houses like that don't get replaced, they get respected. Years later, people would argue about how it all really happened. They'd say it was violence, or fear, or timing. They'd point to names, wars, headlines that came after. They'd be wrong. What held wasn't muscle, it wasn't luck. It wasn't even intelligence on its own. It was alignment. A man who understood the board. A woman who understood the cost. A neighborhood that understood, who never abandoned it. That's what survived. Outsiders came and went. Some louder, some smarter, some cleaner, all temporary, because none of them could replace memory. None of them could rewrite loyalty. None of them could stand in a place and feel it answer back. Harlem didn't belong to whoever wanted it most. It belonged to whoever carried it without trying to own it. That's the lesson most never learn. Power isn't proven when the streets are loud. It's proven when they're quiet and nothing moves unless you allow it. The crown was never flashy. The throne was never visible, but it was always occupied, and it still is.